It's a queer takeoff.
Well, thank goodness he's gone.
Ready when you are.
Expanding frogs, rusting dogs, and the patio furniture of the gods. All on this 14th edition of I'll Explain Later, the Doctor Who podcast that puts sticky tape on the windows, that sort of thing, with your hosts Matt Needer,
Jim Hall,
and John West.
Tonight, at the start of his epic quest to restore balance to creation, Tom Baker has to keep a rubber Alsatian away from his family jewels. We dangle our scringe stones around our necks and prepare for the Ribos Operation.
When Sarah Jane returns, Rose clashes with a cougar, while Tennant resists the offer of head. Tony head, that is. We brew a fresh batch of Nescafe Gold Blend and catch up with school reunion.
and always look a gift horse in the mouth, especially when it's sprayed gold and wears a revealing leotard. Pertwee and his new friend Pigbin Josh grapple heroically with the Claws of Axos. Hi, hope you're all good, thanks for downloading. We're kicking off tonight's show with the Ribos Operation. It is Ribos, isn't it, guys?
Yes, I believe so. I called it Ribos for years, but let's remember it's like a Reebok trainer.
I've been confused because I grew up on the Target paperback and had it as Ribos in my head, so if we do go off message on the pronunciation,
please do write in and correct us.
This could easily be the most interesting thing we have to say about this.
Oh, come. So yeah, this kicks off 1978's season 16 of Doctor Who, which is noteworthy for being the first time the show tried to do a sort of story arc that went through the whole season. In this case, the Key to Time, which...
and what, pray, is the Key to Time, Jim?
I'm glad you asked me that question. So what's running through all these stories? We kicks off here with the...
So it ran 78 to 79, this whole arc,
yeah,
right?
it probably went over the Christmas.
Yeah.
The TARDIS is dragged off course
Much as
by...
they hoped it would be over by Christmas. Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on, Jim.
If I may get back to what I said.
Yes.
The TARDIS is dragged off course by the White Guardian, who's, for all intents and purposes, God, sitting in his wicker chair.
Essentially, yeah.
The man from Del Monte, if you remember those adverts.
He's got a glorious linen suit.
It's fantastic.
It's a double-breasted linen suit with huge, wide lapels. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's much better than what they wear in season 20. Well, we've already done Terminus when the Black Guardian has
right.
his...
he's got the duck stuck to his head,
Yeah.
The Doctor is given a big quest by the White Guardian, which is basically the universe is getting out of balance. The Guardian wants the Key to Time to restore harmony, and the Key to Time is a very powerful artifact. It's a crystal cube. It's been split into 6 pieces and scattered throughout creation and disguised.
You say crystal, I mean perspex, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt. It's disguised itself as perspex. Yeah. And to sweeten the deal, the Doctor's been given a new companion, Romana. Another Time Lord.
Yes.
The Doctor doesn't like this because he's a fairly freewheeling kind of guy.
When she's introduced, the camera literally pans up from her feet.
And we're assuming that's Tom Baker. The Doctor's
and he does give her, sorry, we're jumping ahead, but he does give her a look when she steps out, doesn't it? I mean, it's lascivious.
No,
More
it's
than that,
really
he looks
lascivious.
at K9 as if, are you getting this?
Yeah, he looks at K9 and goes...
He's on one of those cartoon foxes,
Well, it's more like Peep Show or something. You can imagine some little voiceover from him at that point.
But yeah, it's not terribly subtle.
Yeah, but that's the setup of the Key to Time. So we've got another 6 stories where various segments will be found, leading to a big denouement, which we'll come to in about 5 years' time. Yeah. That's the arc. The Ribos Operation itself, the story that kicks off this epic quest involves the Grafin Decay, a deposed tyrant. He's looking for a new planet to set up his empire anew, and he goes to Ribos, which is it's by his standards a backwards place. It's probably like Earth a few hundred years ago. The locals certainly rather superstitious, aren't they? They believe in
sort of pre-enlightenment.
Yeah. He wants to buy this planet. What he doesn't realise is that the people selling it to him aren't from Ribos. They're a pair of con men called Unstaff and
Garen and
Unstaff. Yes.
Who are from Earth, aren't they?
Yes.
Well, Garen's from Hackney Wick. It emerges.
Yeah.
But a stone's throw from where we're recording.
I'm going to ask John first. What did you think of this? As a story and as a start to this epic Key to Time cycle.
It didn't really grab me, the arc.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really liked that opening scene with the White Guardian, because it was a very... First of all, I thought that all of the set design work and costumes and things like that was really great.
It's beautiful to look at this, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like luscious.
And so there are two sort of key scenes. There are or two locations rather. There's the glorious sort of desert tundra with the colonial chair.
This is the White Guardian style. Yeah, it's like he's on the Serengeti plains.
Yeah, exactly.
Through the magic of CSO
drinking
is it a green?
A green. I don't know. I'm guessing it's chartreuse or something. But he looks very dapper, doesn't he? But it's very weird. It's a very weird setup.
It's sort of one of the few bits of like overt surrealism, I think, in sort of classic Doctor Who, isn't it? Where it's like, I mean, it's proper kind of like ripped from a Dali painting kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, although like earlier we've had, I don't know if you've seen Terror of the Autons recently, but we've got a Time Lord who appears in sort of bowler hat pinstripe in midair. So,
I quite like those little touches.
Yeah.
Of like,
but so that's great. And then the planet Ribos is sort of this Flemish medieval kind of look to it, and they've got the sort of the bells which sound a lot like Bruges or somewhere like that. It's really nicely done, and although it's all done in a studio very clearly, it is very good, and the catacombs are they go down into the catacombs in episode 4.
It feels expensive, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and the costumes are good. And I mean, we've spoken before about Robert Holmes. I think a lot of the sort of world building stuff, like the rituals that the guards go through, the religious rituals around these relics, all of that's quite interesting. It's played a bit long for my liking, but it's interesting. But in terms of setting up the key to time, I wasn't grabbed because they don't really nail at the beginning why you should care. Obviously, the key to time is just a MacGuffin, right?
It's so route one as an idea, though, as well, isn't it? If you're doing like a running, I mean, I know we say
you're not invested in it from the off, though, are you?
Well, not particularly, because I mean, it's and I say this, saying that you can go too far in the other way, to any of Stephen Moffat's attempts at building complex multi-story arcs. But I think, and I suppose it's a toe in the water for a kind of new style of storytelling for Doctor Who, that you might do a multi-part story. But I don't think it really adds anything to it.
The slimmest of threads.
It's really slender.
I'm still a bit confused why Graham Williams, and this was his second year as producer, I think he wanted to do this as his first season, but things got a bit ahead of him. He wanted the Doctor to not be such a freewheeling guy and to have a definite reason why he was going to places. I've got to say, I've always liked the idea that the Doctor just ambles around.
Yeah, rocks up. Yeah,
presumably we see a tiny percentage of his adventures. Well, his travels, which are adventures rather than travel logs or something. But I don't know if you've seen this. Graham Williams actually typed up a massive document. It's like pages and pages of stuff, reams of stuff, which includes theoretical physics and Taoism and all this kind of stuff to kind of justify the key and why the Guardians would be there. And ultimately, it's just, let's link these stories together. They're looking for these ideas.
And it's just a super basic quest narrative. And that's the thing. It's like when you look at, sort of 20 years later or so, when they were doing like all the treatments for the American series, and the idea of that, it seems like a very Route 1 quest mission that they had there of the Doctor on the trail of his father. It's like it really doesn't add anything overall to the tone, other than just to establish, to add a bit more rationale for why the Doctor turns up on a planet.
But
that's never been my problem. I've never failed to enjoy an episode of Doctor Who because I've been bothered about why he's there.
But the setup thing, I mean, I don't actually have a problem with a Route 1 quest scenario and the sort of MacGuffin element. I mean, for example...
it doesn't spoil the story. I just don't know why they bothered.
It ought not to. But I think you can make it work. I mean, if you think of Wagner's Ring Cycle or the Lord of the Rings, for example. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings films, and the open for that sets it up really well because you see the bad guy with the ring.
You saw what happened last time.
Last time, and therefore you're invested. Right, that must never happen again. You understand the peril, you understand why the hero must find the thing or destroy the thing or whatever. But there's no setup here. that, it's
that's
just...
it. You don't feel the ticking time bomb of the universe sliding out of alignment. It's not like this situation that the White Guardian describes at the beginning of like the universe is out of alignment. It's not like you suddenly see everything going crazy and think, oh Christ.
Yeah.
Well, it's like if you think about Stolen Earth and Journey's End in the end of the second Doctor, of the 10th Doctor's run. There are planets that are missing. You begin to see things are out of alignment. You get what's going on here, and you're confused. And then there's an answer. Here, he just says, "Oh yeah, the universe is out of balance."
Or even
whilst relaxing in a wicker chair. So.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and I'm sort of loath to praise these too much, but even in a sort of Moffat one where like you've got all time running at once or something, you have some sense of like the stakes being raised. Whereas here, I mean, the only clue that something's gone wrong is that the White Guardian says so.
Mentions it, and obviously they didn't have the budget then to do anything as epic as Lord of the Rings or the TV show now, but they could at least superimpose some footage of cities burning or something they might have had in the archives, something to just give it a bit of...
they could have raided some of the uniform stores that they've got, or some of the monsters that they didn't have to license very expensively, and just have a shot. I mean, that's how Russell T Davies, or I guess one of the more modern writers, would have done it. Sort of control room in the Sontarans. Our home planet has disappeared. Cut to another alien. Oh no, our entire battle fleet has disappeared, and then cut to Earth unit. Somebody saying,
exactly,
etc., etc.
Freak localized weather conditions.
Exactly. Again, we'll come to that, and then you could have in this chaos the TARDIS buffeted about and arriving in this calm and odd, surreal scene, but they didn't do that. They just
that's great. I would love to see him do what you had done.
Yeah,
but I suppose that's the thing, and it's probably we'll probably move on shortly just to discussing the merits of this story. In and of itself, it's maybe important to discuss the key to time up top, because really it doesn't have any bearing, I think, on the rest of the story as it plays out.
No, and throughout the season, obviously we'll review all of those stories as they come up, but other than the very last one, the Armageddon Factor, that seems to be the only time the quest and the key itself features.
I just think it solves a problem that I never really had a problem with. I never really...
Because I've always liked the fact that the Doctor turns up and does the right thing, even though he'd probably rather bugger off, but he's kind of feels morally duty-bound to kind of help out. I don't really feel I need some reason why he has to go to that planet. And largely, I suppose the only thing that comes from it is that you have that conflict with Romana's character.
Yeah.
He doesn't want her there. He doesn't like being ordered about anyway. So I suppose there's that friction that comes to it, certainly in this story, and probably the next couple as well.
Yeah, and this is, of course, the first of two Romanas. Well, I suppose technically there are lots, aren't there, because of the bit of business with the regeneration. Mary Tam.
Tam, yeah.
Sadly no longer with us. She's I don't know, I mean, she's quite witty.
I like her. I think she plays it, I think against Tom Baker's...
ludicrous costume.
Yeah, insane. But I think, I think in terms of like having a central dynamic between the two of them, at a point where Tom Baker is sort of on the path to a greater level of wackiness, I think the idea of giving him quite a down-the-line kind of intelligent ice queen to play off against is a good one. And I sort of like them as a kind of lightly kind of sparring. It's a bit spikier than any relationship we've seen Tom Baker's Doctor have. He's obviously on the back foot because he can't be as paternal as he would have been with Leela or Sarah or anyone. I like it. I mean, there's not too much. I mean, she's written as an ice queen, and she's written. It's quite a stock characterization, I think. But no, I mean, I think it works pretty well.
Not the standout performance, though, is it?
No, so yeah, shall we move on?
No, that's the other thing. It's like there are a lot of characters in this that maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit here, but I think my overall takeaway from this story is that I think as a story and as an adventure, it's very, very slight. And I think one of the problems why it feels very slight is that the Doctor and Romana... and actually, possibly this plays out as a result of it being part of the key to time up. But the Doctor and Romana seem very distanced from everything else that's going on. They feel like bit part characters in this other story that's happening around them.
And look, just the stakes are so low.
The stakes are incredibly low, but they are surrounded by terrific characters. And essentially, what you are looking at is this kind of three-way conflict between the citizens of a planet, these two con men, and then this military warlord who wants to buy it off them.
Well, the thing for me is that the citizens aren't really represented. It does seem to be just...
Apart from Binro the Heretic.
Who's, not very typical. In fact, he seems to be there... Well, we'll come on to Binro in the fullness of time.
Yeah.
So, sorry, John, we kind of interrupted 10 minutes back.
No.
You were saying about you kind of like the design and the sets of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the sets, the design. They're the standout bits for me. I really liked that sort of surreal opening segment. But the fundamental setup for this story and the arc as a whole didn't work. And as Matt said, the story itself is very slight. And I don't really have anything to disagree with it. The stakes are very low. The Doctor and Romana seem so one step removed from the rest of the action that's going on. And really, you are... And I think this is quite dangerous when you're just introduced a brand new companion who you're going to be with for the next at least few stories. When clearly Garon, played by Ian Cuthbertson, is absolutely the standout.
Oh, he's amazing
performer.
Amazing. That's like moving through all those different accents, and he's a terrific character.
And it's we've already seen a quote unquote lovable rogue in Sabalom Glitz, and this is how it's done properly.
This is how you do it properly, totally.
Well, this is the text, isn't it, of that thing? Well, actually, no. I suppose Jago and Lightfoot are the text of the Holmesian double act, which is a sort of cliche Doctor Who fans trot out a lot. I've got to say, I've never been a fan of Holmesian double acts. Because I mean, we won't be talking about Talons of Weng Chang, but in that, at least, that pairing is there because it's a 6-part story that needs some interesting padding in it. With this, it seems like an attempt to repeat it. And Ian Cuthbertson's very good in the role as written. I'm slightly less convinced by, is it Nigel Plaskett as in staff?
Yeah.
And then you get on later to Sabalon, Glitz and Dibber. But all of these, the dynamic is always just Feedline and Blowhard for all of these kind of team-ups.
Well, I thought Unstoff, who was the actor again?
Nigel
Plaskett.
Partly hair.
He's really bad right up until the point where he has the key scene with the Binro the Heretic, at which point his sort of naive, plain aspect really works. I mean, Binro the Heretic, just for the purposes of anyone who hasn't seen it, it turns out that he
sort of shunned. He's the mad old man of the town, isn't he?
He's been cast out because
the lights in the sky are stars,
yeah.
the suns. Yes,
exactly. And he's sort of a Galileo figure, essentially, isn't he? And there's a bit where Unstoff and Binro are discussing, and Unstoff said, "Well, what if I tell you that everything you say is right, and there are other planets and there are other worlds, and I'm from another world?" It's actually more moving than it should be.
See, that's a really, really lovely scene, but in some ways, like, that is a scene that in most other stories would be given to the Doctor or the companion. You know, it would be them who would be...
Or it'd be kind of the point of the story that the society is going to move on.
That's the thing. So it's a weird... I mean, it's beautiful. It's really nicely done. It's really nicely played by everyone involved. But it's a sort of... a kind of irrelevant scene that also only serves to emphasise how sidelined the Doctor and Romana are in this story, because I mean, literally, they are bystanders to a con trick, essentially. Yeah. And I wonder if that is, having, I don't want to immediately contradict myself, but having said that, the key to time doesn't really have any bearing on what happens in this as a story. I think perhaps there's an argument that it could be a negative for what happens on this story, because they are simply so focused on getting in, getting out, getting the job done, that their interface with everything else that goes on. Yeah,
let's hope Doctor Who never tries to do a bank heist kind of story again. That would be a disaster.
Yeah, terrible. Fingers crossed.
Going back to that scene with Binro, it's very celebrated. I'm not being contrary, but I'm not so keen on it. I sort of disagree with you, John. I like Unstaff for Plaskett's performance up until then, and I'm suddenly a bit confused why this con man suddenly feels duty-bound to kind of help this stoddery old man with no teeth out. I think several people have said this. The first time I heard it was from Tat Wood, but it's kind of odd that you got that scene when it's like, Binro, actually you're a man of science and reason, and that's how the universe really works. When the entire setup of this season is, actually, no, there is a force of light and darkness in the universe. Oh, yeah. And actually there is a war going on between those two things.
Good and evil,
so it's kind of
kind
whether Robert Holmes deliberately did that, or whether it was just he had to, the Guardian scenes were grafted onto a story he already had. I mean, I don't know.
Well, this is what I slightly wonder. I mean, I think let's track where this is in relation to all the other Tom Baker serials that we've looked at, that we've seen a few from, I think we saw Mask of Mandragora, that was beginning of series 14.
And Deadly Assassin.
And then Horns of Nymon, right out on the other end of things. And I slightly feel, and correct me if you disagree with this, but I slightly feel that this is the point where you start to feel just like the focus slipping a bit. When you look at the kind of Hinchcliffe, when you look at Deadly Assassin, you look at even Mask of Mandragora, which is kind of not a hugely celebrated story, but it's still, I mean, I remember we said it's like it's an A-team bringing their A-game. It's
pretty
like,
underrated.
It's tight and punchy. Whereas this, it just sort of slightly feels like Tom Baker's getting a bit more indulgent. The direction is getting a bit sloppier. The stories, I think, are a lot less tight. And the story has got lots of good bits and lots of good elements, but never really quite pulls itself together as a whole. And I just feel that kind of rat-a-tat-tat kind of tautness of the earlier Tom Baker seasons is just starting to slip away at this point, and it's starting to just do... It's by no means disastrous, this, but it's just starting to do Doctor Who-y type things and become a bit,
There's a lot of Tom Baker shtick in this, and the stuff that's been left in that you think, really? I mean, even the bit at the end when he's disguised as one of the Graf's troops, and rather than taking his helmet off, just kind of lowers his head and it drops off. It's like, what?
By the way, that's the third Tom Baker story that we've seen where...
It was me.
It was him. It was him in the guard costume all along.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the split between Hinchcliffe and Graham Williams, and also the fact that Tom Baker had been in the role for 3 years by the time Graham Williams took over. He gets a lot more confident, and I think right back on our very first show when we reviewed Horns of Nymon, which I think we all felt was good, but my problem with it was in the first maybe 1 or 2 episodes when Tom Baker was just being left to do his own thing, but at least it was in quarantine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Graham Williams era. I think what a lot of people have said is the Hinchcliffe era was largely based on remaking classic horror films, and the Graham Williams is pushing much more towards literature and even having books as physical objects in there.
Yeah.
Maybe not in this story, but... those sort of literary considerations.
I think there's a lot to like about it. I just think in terms of, in part, kind of looks forward a bit to what I've got to say about the third Doctor, kind of Barry Letts era, coming up in a couple of stories' time. But I don't know, I think it's just that sense where you have a couple of eras in 70s Doctor Who where it really feels like everyone's kind of working off the same page, and it's tight and it's punchy and it's snappy and it kind of works, and everything comes together and becomes greater than some of its parts. Whereas I think, and as with Horns of Nymon as well, I think there's a lot to like in that. But I think there's just, it's bits that never quite come together into, it's all the ingredients are there, but it's not a very nice cake.
I just can't believe this was the one that was launching the season. I mean, it's a huge difference between how the show's been done for the last 10, 11 years or whatever. Well, you'd have a big opening, and this seems like a mid-season story.
Yeah,
I'm not sure why one of the more epic stories from further down the line wasn't kicking this story arc off.
Yeah, it's like the slow release from a balloon, isn't it? It's interesting though, Matt, and I agree with you that this is the point at which you sort of almost in real time see the Fourth Doctor era go to seed. Moving on to Paul Seed as the Graf.
If I wasn't so tired, I'd stand up.
Matt's just shaking his head at the microphone. Your lips are moving, but the words won't come out.
I did praise the production design and the scenery, and I think we should all be grateful there was any left after Paul Seed had finished munching his way through it.
Paul Seed is magnificent.
He's terrible, but he's brilliant.
He's terrible, but he's brilliant.
Oh, no, I think he's absolutely fantastic. I think that's exactly what that role needs.
I laughed out loud at the point where he runs off and then gets blown up.
I absolutely love it. I much prefer him to Cuthbertson. I found Cuthbertson quite grating. I mean, he's doing what the script is doing, that asking him to do there, but I think Paul Seed, just to use the phrase, commits fully to it. I think he's so overboard, and I can't believe he's not more kind of celebrated. I suppose it's because later in the season you got Peter Jeffrey as a similar kind of pantomime tyrant, Count Grendel in Androids of Tara. I think he's great, and he's England's David Fincher, isn't he? Because he directed the British House of Cards.
Yes, really? That's right.
Yeah. And he was nearly Tarrant in Blake Seven as well.
Like proper Renaissance man.
Oh yeah, no. If you watch the extras on the DVD, he's fantastic. He's kind of the go-to man there.
But no, he's great. I mean, it's like, and he can bark and scream and shout.
He's great. And I think it's great that he's ludicrous, but he's actually the cause of at least a couple of cliffhangers, I think, isn't he? It's like, oh yeah, no, he's actually going to kill the Doctor if he finds him now. It's kind
but
of...
it's that thing that I mean, and this is what, you know, Robert Holmes, as we sort of said last, because obviously last month we looked at the Crotons, and we said we were talking about what is a Robert Holmes script, why are they so celebrated, and it's the characterization, it's the fact that he can sort of very economically sketch out who these people are, what their motivations are, what their relationships are to other people, and make them feel real. And I think, you know, you say that Ian Cuthbertson's doing what the script demands of him. I think Paul Seed is doing what the script demands of him as well. But it's a really good script, and he's a really good actor. And that's why it works, I think, that kind of shrieking, screaming, but, you know, it's done... It's OTT and it's obviously meant to be funny, but it's done really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would have been good as a little play in its own right, because it does feel like sort of the BBC Shakespeare cycle that they were doing at the time, specifically like The Winter's Tale or something with the design. It just doesn't feel like a Doctor Who story at all, and certainly not one that's kicking off some sort of epic mystical quest.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the Shrizenval.
The what?
The son of...
Shriventhal.
Yes. Which is pretty notorious as one of the very worst Doctor Who monsters. Thankfully, it's not in it very much, but it's kind of very rubbery, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing, though. I think it's quite cute. I think it's like a cute, rubbery little...
And I can't quite put my finger on this, but even though there's a lot of studio-bound Doctor Who stories, this feels like it kind of means it. It feels like that's part of the artifice. I don't think it's ever trying to convince you you're not watching a stage production, almost. So the fact that the Shrizenval looks like a sort of cheap prop doesn't really bother me at all, really.
No,
I mean, it is the cliffhanger to part one.
I didn't think it was that bad, actually.
No, I thought it was pretty decent.
I genuinely didn't think it was that bad, particularly the one that's guarding the jewels.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I've seen those cosplay photos that you did, but
they weren't cosplay photos. But yeah, it moved. It had teeth. It had a nice bloody sort of mouth and all that. I thought it was all right.
I think in the grand scheme of sort of rubber puppets that have had to pass for terrifying monsters in Doctor Who, I don't think this is one of the terrible ones.
Not even from this season, even.
This is a notoriously bad one.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some great lines, and you were talking about the writing.
Yeah, some real zinger dialogue.
I mean, I think there's one where Tom Baker says or the Fourth Doctor says of Garen, he might just be an innocent villain. which I thought was quite a fun sort of one too, and the bit that really made me laugh was the line when and it's after a sad scene where Binro the Heretic has just died, and then straight off the back of that, Garon says, "Charming fella, the little we saw of him." It's just great.
Well, Garen is also, it's like, it's so well observed, the kind of like the kind of bullshitting that he does in order to persuade the Graf that he's buying a really good planet here. The line I noted down was, there's a certain honest peasant artistry that speaks of the soil. He says when he's telling him about...
What a load of bollocks.
I know, it's brilliant, but it's so well observed, and like you kind of... I think you are rooting for them to get away with it, Garen and Unstopped.
I don't know.
I was.
I'm behind the Graf Indicate the whole way. I identify with the deposed tyrant.
So you weren't buying the scringe stone, which you hang around your neck so you don't get scringes anymore.
See, that's a lovely scene, isn't it?
I think that's great. On the strength of this, are we looking forward to watching the rest of the Key to Time season?
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked about this being the Graham Williams era. But I noticed the script editor is this chap, Anthony Reid.
Who wrote your favourite, Horns of Nymon.
Yes. But what was their relationship at this point? How exactly did that work? I mean, I know that we're going to get on to sort of Terence Dix and Barry Letts and their relationship, but did these guys get on? Was it sort of
it seems like, I mean, Graham Williams died in, I think, 85 in a shooting accident. So
it wasn't Anthony Reid, was it?
It wasn't. There's not a huge amount of interviews with the two of them sort of going down memory lane. Anthony Reid always seems very charming on DVD. He's always got good stuff to say about Graham Williams. It sounds like they work well together. And
the director of this was the gloriously named George Fenton Foster.
Who, as Paul Seed describes, as camp as a row of tents. Yeah, I mean, just going back to your stuff about production design and stuff, I think this looks great. There's so many, plus points to this. It's just, it doesn't feel that great as a story.
Yeah.
But the other thing I've not mentioned is Dudley Simpson's music, which, obviously we're very familiar with him, but every so often he'll pull something out of the bag with a story, like City of Death or something. I think this is one of his standout scores. I've found, even though it's been a few weeks since I watched this now, I find myself humming it in quiet moments, this kind of organ-based
Yeah, it's definitely one of his better ones. Yeah. And I like a lot of his work, but a lot of it is also horrible. And we'll come to that.
Or repetitive.
But yeah, this is really one of the good ones. The organ stuff is very good, I thought.
Hey, John, did you like the Seer?
Oh, the Seeker.
Seeker, sorry.
Yes.
The new
Seeker.
Seeker.
She is remarkable.
Who, again, well done, Binro. The world works on logical lines, but this fortune teller knows exactly what's going to happen.
That's not entirely consistent, is it? But any excuse to have a woman with a load of white makeup smeared on her face and carrying around divining with 2 bones. It was. She really acted her heart out, bless her, didn't she?
Yeah, I think there's a story about her sitting in the BBC canteen afterwards.
Sitting in the BBC canteen afterwards?
Afterwards, but just in normal clothes, but with that makeup on.
Oh, right, okay.
Eating her chips or whatever. She was probably the influence for, I don't know how well you know End of Time, that's David Tennant's story.
Yep.
But the Time Lords have a similar kind of character.
Oh, yeah, they do, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess what we're saying is good collection of bits doesn't really hang together.
There's just not, there isn't really a story, and I think it's very dissatisfying that they introduce a new companion in Romana, don't really give her much to do, and then give a lot of the other characters more character. It's not the best way to introduce her, and the arc, which is meant to be this great mission, just falls flat. It's dead on arrival.
Is Cher the only city? The principal city.
Was that the guy from Z-Cars?
Yeah. His name was Robert Keegan.
Oh, yes.
And he was the desk sergeant.
Oh, I remember.
And he was lovely. And his wife had a donkey sanctuary.
Did she?
Yes, yes.
I went up for a TV series last year that was about a donkey sanctuary. Don't know what happened to it.
I live not far from Maidstone, which of course is the biggest donkey sanctuary in the southeast.
Is it?
So, we fast forward to 2006.
10 years ago.
I know. School Reunion, written by Toby Whithouse. The 10th Doctor and Rose are called back by Mickey to investigate some weird, spooky-ish goings-on at a school. And also investigating those same events, a former friend of the Doctor,
Dodo Chaplet.
Sabalom Glitz.
Stein from Resurrection of the Daleks. Wants his school dinners.
Any one of those could have been quite an interesting watch, but no, it's Sarah Jane Smith.
Oh.
I think it's fair to say probably this story has a very good reputation.
Extremely good reputation, yeah.
And I'm not going to, I think, deviate from the consensus on this. I think it's absolutely terrific. So much to talk about, so many things going on. But Jim, you raised an eyebrow. I wasn't quite sure.
I'm not sure which point I raised. I'm probably just drinking my Holston pills with some appreciation there. No, when this came out, everyone was cock-a-hoop. Well, the fans were. It's still at a point when the show's super popular with the public. Not to say it isn't now, but it seems to be a bit more of the background
fresher novelty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a big deal to bring back an old companion in Sarah Jane, and K9 as well, who we...
we didn't mention K9.
Who we didn't mention in the...
He was in the Ribos Operation, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't suppose he had a big role, but,
Well, it did feel like a really pointless bolt-on in the Ribos Operation, and in this, it feels
it's quite emotional.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's either well-written or even the music or whatever it is. I remember I was getting quite choked up watching this the other night, even. So the K9 moments.
Yeah, it's really cool. Oh, one question. Did they make a beaten-up K9, or is that the old prop?
That they weathered? That's a very good question.
No, but I would imagine they did a new one. I mean, this is they're not going to cut corners, are they, really? Yeah, no, I remember when this came out, certainly fans were like amazed at Sarah, because it's the first time we're maybe taking it a bit for granted that Elizabeth Sladen's coming back, because she came back several times afterwards and had a whole spin-off series on children's BBC, CBBC. But yeah, it's a big deal that she comes back, and the main thing I want to say about this is, as a story, it's kind of the reverse of Ribos Operation. The story is slight, but that's kind of that it needs to be, because the main point here is the character moments. The audience are getting used to the Doctor and Rose. The Doctor's already changed, but I remember at the time thinking, how's this show going to survive Billie Piper leaving? Because he's such a big part of it. And to say to the new audience, actually the Doctor's had a whole string of companions.
Yes.
And just the character moment of Rose realising, Jesus, I'm just one in a long line, and at some point I'm going to go off as well. And I'm assuming by the time this was made, the end of this season when Rose does leave was absolutely planned out, if not filmed, possibly. But it's a really emotional story.
You're right. It's a really smart setup for that to say to the new fans.
There will be other companions.
I think that's what it's all about, though, because I think when I first read, or when it was first announced that they were bringing back Sarah Jane and K9, it was a point where, Series 1, they'd been very, very careful and very, very specific with which elements of the old series to bring through, so that it didn't just look like it was being made for the heads. It's like that it was being.
The Time War was the perfect thing there, because it was saying kind of none of it might have happened, but if you're a new person, you don't need to know all this stuff.
Exactly. You just introduce enough information. So my thought was like, this is, on some level, is this a pointless act of nostalgia? And I think it's not, and I think for two reasons. One is that Elizabeth Sladen is absolutely brilliant in this. She absolutely sings it, and it's absolutely joyous to see her again.
Particularly in her scenes with Billie Piper.
Yeah. So that's point A. But point B is that it is making a point fundamentally about the Doctor's relationship with humans, and that's the big takeaway, and how it plays into the overall story of the season.
With women, I think, as well.
Calm down, John.
No,
I think that's a very good. That is a very good point, because of the sort of Mickey/Tin Dog comparisons that they make, which are fun, but also it's very, very astute in how it uses its characters. And so, they've really thought through, what does it mean to reintroduce a character who the Doctor sort of travelled with 20 or 30 years ago now, and what does that mean for how Rose sees herself? And, within the arc of, this is a season that I've got very mixed feelings about, but, the ongoing story is that, the Doctor and Rose are cruising for a bruise, essentially. Yeah, exactly.
Doctor Who has never really looked back before. I mean, you've had Jubilee episodes like the Five Doctors, but they've never really dealt with
the whole of the JNT era.
The bringing back for the purpose of bringing back, whereas this is all about recontextualising the past. Yeah. And I know that there were a lot of fans who, were a bit kind of not up in arms, but a bit miffed about how it sort of recontextualises the Fourth Doctor and Sarah's relationship as a quasi-romantic one that she treats like a romantic breakup. But I think it makes perfect sense, and I think it also. It adds a lot of dramatic meat kind of retrospectively to those stories. I kind of now, when I see the Fourth Doctor and Sarah, I kind of think a bit about School Reunion and looking forward to how that relationship plays out.
Even with School Reunion, I don't think for me that recontextualised it as the Sarah Jane and the Fourth Doctor being romantic. It was just that was a period of her life which is nothing else will compare to it in an everyday kind of life. I'm quite happy to leave the romance out of that.
No, I think I'm sorry, but I think the romance thing is explicitly there, not least because this is it is about Doctor Who, and it is very cleverly about introducing the idea that there have been other companions, there will be new companions, and that's okay. But I think that on top of that is layered, whether by Whithouse or Russell T Davies in The Polish, the theme of male absenteeism and abandonment. And that's, walking away from relationships, unrequited love. There's so much real emotional baggage there. And right at the end when she says, there was this one guy who I travelled with.
Which is a reason why, specifically in relation to him saying, "Did you ever settle down and have kids?" And she says, "No, no one else lived. There was one guy in my life who was a tough act to follow."
Yeah, it's very difficult to see that, I think, through any other prism than.
I don't think it's going so far as to say, they were actively doing it during the 70s.
Well, no, that's what makes it even because I think
Tom Baker never did that kind of stuff.
That's what makes it
living man.
That's what makes it even sadder, because it's very heavily implied that it was
unrequited.
Yeah. So he abandoned her, as let's be honest, men often do. He abandoned her, and not on top of that. He abandoned her without them ever having actually had a proper romantic relationship. I think it's incredibly sad. I was very moved by it. And the way as well. I mean, it's very clear when she and Sarah Jane and Rose are having the key conversation where they start bickering and they end up laughing, which, by the way, is a beautifully structured scene.
Yeah,
the fact that they can move in about 90 seconds from bickering to laughing, it feels very natural. It's very well written. But yeah, Rose even says, "Oh, the only time I've ever had this kind of argument before was when we were arguing about a bloke." So
With her mate Shireen, who we never get to see.
Yes, Shireen.
Bloody Shireen.
I mean, I guess, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, both of you said you were sort of quite moved watching this, and I would have to say as well that because I've seen this a lot. This was sort of at that point where I was kind of repeat watching a lot of new Doctor Who a lot at that point, whereas now a lot of the episodes, I just kind of watch and then watch them again for this. But I was very moved by this, and especially those final scenes where Sarah Jane goes into the TARDIS, the death of K9, and then the reveal of the new K9. Literally never failed to bring a tear to the eye.
Oh, the sacrifice of K9 just...
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Can't deal with it.
Oh, the little waggle of the ears and the tail as the Doctor leaves him for the last time is extraordinary. But I have to say, Jim sort of flagged this at the start, that it is a very slight story, that is not a story that's designed to do anything other than just to provide a base for this character interaction.
In the same way a lot of regeneration stories are. The main point is something else other than the actual drama. It's more about introducing the characters.
But it's still a logical and well-structured story.
Yeah, it's fine.
Do you know what? I enjoyed this a lot less watching it this time around for these purposes. I think possibly because, all the bits that I thought stood out still stood out. But I have to say, this time around, I was a bit more irritated by the shortcomings of the rest of it. Now, there's a big asterisk to that point, which is that to be honest, I regard this as one of the sort of solid stock classics of certainly modern Doctor Who and possibly all Doctor Who, because I think the thing that it's meant to do, which is tell that emotional story and reintroduce Sarah Jane to the series, is done so exceptionally well that, what it aims to do, it does unimpeachably brilliantly. Yeah. But I think the rest of it, I think in terms of the direction, I think in terms of the writing and in terms of the setup, it's as close to new series Doctor Who I think ever comes to being explicitly a kids' show. And I also think it lapses very, very often into that thing which I hate of being quite jokey without ever actually being funny. I think tonally it's all over the place. I think that the direction is incredibly mannered and OTT, and tonally it's just they're never quite sure what it's going to be like. And part of the big problem with it for me is like Murray Gold's score, I think, is almost unlistenably terrible in this. I mean, it's so bombastic and so over the top.
I completely disagree. I thought this was one of Murray Gold's. I actually wrote.
This is one of Dudley Simpson's.
I actually wrote that this is one of his more understated and not bombastic.
Oh my God, I thought this was full of totally unnecessary bombast.
Is this the first time we're going for?
My note is music good, not bombastic, sinister. And a lot of the sound work was good. So I don't know whether it matters which television you're watching.
Given we've reviewed a lot of New Who, like one every episode so far, this is the only time I've really made a note on it, which is, as with you, I watched this a couple of times when it came out, but I've not watched it for probably 8 years or something. It was the bit when all the kids are on the computers and you've got what seems like a very cliched bit of Murray Gold and everything's going very rapidly. And my note is kind of, this feels really cliched, but was it at the time? I'm not sure if this is maybe one of the first times he's doing that, but it feels like it's autopilot.
I think a lot of the sort of the school imagery, it's not helped by that level of... I mean, to me personally, I think the music sounds very cheap. And on this, and I think... Is
this in terms of its execution, or...?
Yeah, I think in terms of its execution, but also in terms of the... Yeah. I mean, it's shot in a very sort of close, kind of flat way. I mean, there's not... I quite like the kind of immediacy of a lot of the direction of the Russell T Davies era, but I think... I mean, to be honest, to me, this just feels like the Demon Headmaster.
I think they're probably going... I mean, I don't think any of us... Well, no, you guys are younger than me. You're still too young to have really watched the Demon Headmaster, aren't you? I think.
No, I watched the Demon Headmaster when it came out.
We were too old, really, to have been the target.
We were on the older end.
The parallel
I'm down a few Holston pills. I'm too old.
The parallel I would make is with Dark Season.
Okay.
Which is a Russell T Davies. Yes. We were at the right age to see that.
I remember that terrifying the Jesus out.
Yeah, and that was all to do with computer weirdness as well, wasn't it? So it felt like a well-worn...
I think possibly...
And I thought tonally it was very similar, actually.
Possibly. I don't know. I feel that it's like there's this sort of big disjunctive...
Dark Season being a Russell T Davies
yes, of course, yeah.
thing. But from 1990 or whatever.
Kate Winslet and Sutherland, was it?
Yes, it was, yes. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing that sort of clicked for me this time round is that, I mean, I loved this when it came out, and Toby Whithouse also then sort of, I think straight after this, was the showrunner for Being Human on BBC Three, which I adored. I thought that was really good. And on the strength of that, I kind of had it in my head that I thought, he would be a really great showrunner for Doctor Who one day. I have to say, I think every other Toby Whithouse script has I've found underwhelming to uninvolving. I think on almost every level since then. So what you did I quite like the God Complex. Vampires in Venice we're doing next month, but I
Oilers
didn't think much of that. And then the Under the Lake two-parter.
So hold on, I noticed all of those are from the Moffat era, whereas this is from the RTD era, when he famously polished the scripts up quite a bit.
That's exactly the thing. I mean, because he wasn't brought back for the rest of the RTD era, I assume because he was too tied up on Being Human. I have to say, Being Human is really, really good. But I do sense, to quote John from an earlier podcast, I do sense the RTD polish very, very heavily on this.
Oh, yeah.
Happy slapping hoodies with Aspos and ringtones.
Yeah, but you sense it in certain moments, and other bits have been left to kind of as they stand.
Yeah, and it's weird. He writes that some of the tone of the dialogue is all over the place, because at times there's the kind of, there's the Milo scene at the beginning where he's doing the physics, and the happy slapping hoodies with ringtones and Asbos or whatever it is.
And then Milo answers everything.
Then there's
really
a bit,
rapidly.
and I have to say, I thought the scene where the 10th Doctor confronts Anthony Head by the edge of the school swimming pool was really, really good.
Yeah, it's excellent.
But the dialogue in that is because he says, your people were peaceful to the point of indolence, but you're something new. And he replies, I'm so old, I used to have so much mercy. Which, those are not very Davis-ish lines, I don't think.
Except that this, I think, is the only time that, because I know we've said before that of the Christmas invasion, that whole thing of no second chances. I'm that kind of a man.
I'm going to throw Satsuma at you.
True,
and this is the only
very
time
true that you actually see that. Yeah,
because he says you've got one warning, and it recalls.
This is only 2 or 3 episodes
after that. That's a very
after
good point.
That.
Yeah,
so
and
I don't
beyond
necessarily.
Yeah, it's only 2 or 3 episodes after that, and beyond that, I think there's only the end of Family of Blood or something when it's suddenly he's the vengeful.
He's a real hard ass on
Wraith or something.
I'm glad you mentioned Anthony Head, actually, because 2 things about first, that scene.
He makes a mean cup of instant coffee.
That scene absolutely. That scene by the pool, which we're just talking about, is really sinister. What is it about a villain, a nemesis, and a hero having a chat by the pool that is so sinister? Because obviously Moffat does the same thing in Sherlock to great effect. There's something about a sparring by. Is it the association?
It's sort of
with
weirdly
drowning,
mundane, but kind of odd.
There's that physical body between them there.
Yeah.
It's a bit like crossing the. It's a bit pretentious of me, crossing the Rubicon or something. There's a certain visual thing there, which is this is where we.
It does hit a certain beat, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's just some elemental thing, but it really.
But it reminded me
works.
of the scene you always get in Bond films when the two of them are being very urbane and charming to each other, but they both know they're both saying to each other,
"Yes,
I'm going to kill you in the next hour."
Yes. I thought as well that there was a really interesting line that Anthony Head's character, Mr. Finch, and Mr. Finch says, "You act like such a radical, but you just want to defend the old order of the Doctor," because he's basically saying, "Look, if we bust this equation, we can rule the universe and reform reality, and you can save your people." And and the Doctor bristles at that. He's clearly tempted, but Sarah Jane throws him out of it, and the fact that he wrestles with it and doesn't immediately go for it, so sort of.
And that's a very Davis thing as well, about beating up the Doctor just to sort of challenge his moral code a bit and see, rather than just present him as the the unambiguous hero. It's to suggest that that his
drama.
actions
carry
a level of compromises. Yeah.
But what I really like as well. But what I really like, perhaps I'm going a little bit too far. But the lure of the simple promise of Mr. Finch there. There's one, click your fingers and there's one solution that can deal with everything. And actually, yes, that might be radical, but it isn't necessarily really transformative.
Terribly good idea.
Or a terribly good idea. And I did like Sarah Jane's response that everything has its time, everything ends. And that idea
paraphrasing something that the Doctor kept saying in the first season, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually also, I think maybe giving us a heads up as to the increasingly pessimistic tone that the Russell T Davies era takes.
But it also echoes her realising that her time with the Doctor's over as well, and she's going to,
Yeah, so it works on a few levels. It's nicely done.
But also, I mean, Anthony Head chews the scenery as well.
Gloriously.
I mean, yeah.
He gets the Paul Seed Award for...
Do you know what? I think he just gets away with it.
Oh, he's great.
Come on, Matt. I can't understand it. Also, I don't understand your thing about the direction. I thought the direction was good. I thought the way the CGI interacted with the direction was good, so that, when one of the Krillitanes flies past, the camera shakes a little bit. And
I thought the Krillitanes were awful. I
thought
they're not amazing, but they're
really
completely...
Why is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that, all right, Doctor Who with special effects, I've always been happy that they're representative rather than they knock your socks off.
Yeah.
And I was watching this the other night, and this is 10 years old now. But the Krillitine do look fairly cartoony rather than CGI. But I've not got a problem with that. They completely represent that there's these kind of weird bat people there.
I suppose that's the thing. It's like, and I think I am just saying, and I don't mean this just because I want to punch holes in this arbitrarily, but I think, I've watched this probably more than I have a lot of other new series Doctor Who, just because I love it so much. But I think that was the realisation that I came to last night when I was rewatching this, is that it is an exceptional piece of character work, but I think it is lashed to a story that is mediocre to annoying.
So does that mar it for you, or do you feel it needs a slight story, else it's going to overwhelm what the story's the episode's actually about?
I like how slight the story is, because it allows those good bits to really punch through. It's not like you're sort of trying to fleetingly grab these moments, among other things. I think its priorities are totally in the right place, and I think it does what it needs to do. But I don't know. I mean, I just think I found myself, through the bits that weren't the Doctor and Sarah Jane, kind of like drumming my fingers a bit more, just being a bit annoyed by it. Like the resolution where Mickey sort of pulls the plug, literally.
It's ludicrous, but it's fun.
But that's the thing. It's like it's obviously meant to be funny, but it's not done in a funny way. It's like, it's not. I don't know. I just think the tone of it's really off.
I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, that for me is a classic of the genre, akin to, I'm thinking of the end of Goldfinger, when obviously Sean Connery's playing with the bomb, and then the chap in the nice hat comes along and just brushes his hand aside
totally,
and
that's totally what it's referencing. But I don't. It's not done with any of the panache of something like that.
I also didn't agree with you that the humour was fell flat. I thought that I laughed out loud at the bit where the dinner lady is covered in the nasty stuff at the beginning, and one of them pops her head out and says, "She's quite all right," and then there's a scream and a puff of smoke comes out. That made me laugh. I thought that was great. Oh, yeah. But in terms of the funnies as well, I can't believe you're saying that Anthony Head barely gets away with it, having praised Paul fucking Seed's performance in fucking Ribos. Get the shooty dog thing. That's brilliant.
No,
that's fantastic.
That really annoyed me. I think possibly...
Matt is waving his pen.
Sorry, I'm waving my pen in John's direction.
That's not a euphemism, thank God.
Sheath the pen, come on.
Sheath the pen, I'll put the pen down. I don't know. I mean, again, it's one of those things, and this is not necessarily a reason to beat up on this story, but because this is totally a thing that is a problem for the Moffat era that I'm now applying retrospectively, but that kind of meta deconstructive of the conventions of the series dialogue, I think, just really puts my teeth on edge. It's that thing that you see stamped all the way through that Friend from the Future short that they did to introduce the Bill, the new companion thing coming.
Oh, is that what it's officially designated?
Friend from the Future, yeah, that's what it's called. That kind of, I don't know. It really,
that looks super promising, doesn't it?
It really does. But that kind of, I don't know, it really irked me. That I know lots of people love that.
There is a bit of, and I know that this is. I mean, I don't want to criticise it, because I don't agree with Matt that I don't find those shortcomings to be shortcomings. But,
do you hate Matt now?
More than
is that the end of a 30-year friendship?
More than ever.
But I agree that
this is the last straw.
They do a bit of sort of There's a sort of meta. There's bits of dialogue where they're really talking about the structure of the show rather than Like, for example, when Sarah Jane says the Doctor likes travelling with an entourage, and then Mickey says, I'm the man in Havana, and turns around and says, well, actually, I'm the tin dog. And they're really
Havana?
That's what he says.
I thought you said man in the van.
I thought you said man in a van.
I'm their man in Havana. I thought
Havana's good. Havana's good if he's going Graham Greene on this.
I thought that was what it was. Sorry.
Don't look at your phone. You're halfway through your point.
Well, I'm now.
You're going to look at the script upon your phone.
I was going to see whether the script bears me out.
But while John researches what the line actually was, I mean, I would say that actually that was there's a level of deconstruction that I think works for establishing the character dynamic, and I think having K9 there and drawing those parallels between K9 and Mickey, who ultimately, you know, at this point is just there to hack computers, essentially, despite not really having anything else to do in previous stories.
I still think they have very different roles, but it's more that Mickey realises the pecking order.
Exactly.
Yeah, he describes himself as their man in Havana.
Is it their man in Havana?
Really?
Wow.
Gosh, I'm impressed.
But
I'm impressed that Mickey's read. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
But I really like that stuff because I think that really works in terms of you know, it's a little riff on the established characters of Sarah and K9 that we know, but also it then bleeds forward into Mickey's dissatisfaction and wanting to be promoted to being more than just the tin
which is
dog.
Great. I love all the Mickey stuff in this,
really well.
and the fact that in 1 year he's gone from. I remember watching the very first episode, Rose, and thinking him and Jackie, and just thinking, oh god, these characters coming back. And you know they're brilliant. I still miss Jackie and Mickey. They're fantastic.
Miss Jackie. Yeah, Mickey's great.
In terms of misplaced gags, I mean, I wasn't going to mention one, but the thing I've got noted here is at the very beginning when there's the girl who's been. Was she sent out of English or something? This is the pre-credit sequence. There's a few laugh gags about I'll have you for dinner or something. But just the fact the kid's very clearly being eaten,
yes,
which I just don't think you get away with now, would you?
No, it's very you know, like sort of
it's not graphic, but it's
and that's
very
why I think the sort of
it's
slightly played for laughs tone. I don't know whether I was just put off by that first scene. I mean, it's a very efficient cold open, but. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just, 10 years of sort of public-facing scandals, some of which involve the BBC and a lot of which involve children in care homes. Not sure if now you would be quite so on the nose about saying, oh, she's a kid from a care home, she's therefore going to get eaten by a man taking her into an office.
I wasn't even taking the care home thing on. I mean, with that, I was thinking a bit more like Roald Dahl or something with the orphans and whatnot. But, no, just kids being eaten on screen. I mean, there's a few shows back we did The Beast Below. But with that, the kids kind of get eaten, but then it turns out they're okay at the end.
Yes.
Or normal service is resumed. And
exactly.
That kind of stuff. The thing kind of like that is when Finch is actually trying to get he's explaining why the children are doing all the computer stuff for him. It would have been very easy to say they're young, their brains are plastic and more amenable to this kind of stuff, but it's like he's eating their souls as well. I thought that was a kind of nice touch.
We haven't really discussed the Doctor's performance, like we had David Tennant's performance.
Well, this is super early in what they shot for the series, wasn't it? This was some of the first things that they filmed with David Tennant.
A lot of that stuff in Series 2, where Rose and the Doctor are sort of riding for a fall and they're in their sort of imperial phase. For me, we've discussed this before, grates hugely. But it doesn't feel two-mannered at all. I thought he was great. And that scene in the staff room where he first clocks that it's Sarah Jane.
Oh, yeah.
And he's sort of quivering with excitement.
But I think, he's a fan as well. I think it's sincere when he's introduced to Sarah Jane Smith.
The Doctor, the actor, even Murray Gold's music is...
It's terrific. I think Tennant...
And when she sees the TARDIS as well.
Oh, that's possibly that final scene is my favourite. But that scene where she spots the TARDIS and recoils in horror, and then there's a kind of pan round to reveal the Doctor standing behind her in the gym. I mean, having said that, I wasn't really too into the direction in this. That is exquisite. That is beautifully done.
And you mentioned the final scene. Obviously, there's a beautiful line that she says, "Some things are worth getting your heart broken for." And as we have reviewed Attack of the Cybermen, I think it sums up our relationship with Doctor Who, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely,
absolutely.
Hi.
Laura.
You always did stay up late.
How long have you been back?
About a day and a half. I was just passing by.
At this time of night?
Are you alone?
Yes. No. Look, I'm expecting someone.
At this time of night?
It's a neighbour.
Well, do we have time for a coffee?
Golden roasted, richer, smoother, Nescafe Gold Blend.
Have I can get you out of bed. This coffee tastes good. Hello.
Okay, and for our final story tonight, we're going all the way back to 1971 for the Claws of Axos. This is the third story. Why are you laughing at me, Jim?
You do sound so much like Pat Sharp as a DJ. We're going all the way back to 71.
We're taking it all the way back to who remembers this year?
Yes.
Right, well, we are anyway, whether you like it or not. But
we're way back machine.
We're going all the way back to 1971, Claws of Axos, which was the third instalment of Jon Pertwee's second series. Series 8, which is notable for being the year of the Master, but we'll come on to that. Wow, wow, wow. So, what's the story here? You have Axos, which is an organic spaceship, crash lands somewhere on the south coast and immediately buries itself.
For budgetary reasons.
Not too far from the Newton Power Complex. And a delegation go to visit Axos and meet the Axons, who offer, in return for the energy they need in order to get their craft back into space, offer Axonite, which is potentially the element which is the solution to all the world's energy and nutrition problems. So negotiations get underway with Chinn, was he a minister from...
He's the man from the ministry.
He's the man from the ministry who begins negotiations on behalf of the British government in order to get a supply of Axonite, but the Doctor smells a rat and begins to suspect that the Axons are after something else. So I just want to ask a question first. So, Jim,
hello.
What is this story's reputation? So I'm quite interested. It's not. I'm not aware of it being regarded as a huge classic.
It's not reviled, but I don't think it's held as a classic, which I think is a crying shame. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is the Pertweeest Pertwee. It has all of the elements of Pertwee. It's alien invasion in the home counties. Pertweean unit, the Master, who's, surprise, surprise, involved with the aliens here. Man from the ministry, the bureaucrat. You've got a gentleman of the road, Big Bean Josh, who I'm sure we'll get onto in some detail later. And above all that, it's only 4 episodes long, so it doesn't even have the kind of...
This is the shortest Pertwee we've encountered yet, isn't it?
It's like an espresso hit of Pertwee. And the alien invaders with their unique selling point are just amazing.
Yeah.
This is obviously the early 70s, and Barry Letts is very keen on experimenting with CSO and whatever technology is on offer. It still looks kind of shonky in some ways, but it's so imaginative. They're so fucking psychedelic, and it's still just visually just bizarre. I'm not sure what this would have looked like in black and white, but I absolutely love this. It's maybe not my favourite Pertwee, but it's the most archetypal, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
John, what do you think?
I found it a little dull.
Okay.
But I agree with Jim that all of the Pertwee elements that you want to be there are there, as you said, unit, the Master, a ghastly official, and actually for me this was the standout, some glorious location stunt work.
Yeah. Derek Ware.
Really great stuff. I did as well, like, it says action by Havoc.
Yeah.
I don't know who Havoc were.
Well, Havoc were the stunt team throughout the Pertwee era, so...
Sorry, no, to begin with they were, and then I think they got replaced by I've forgotten his name.
Contractor.
Who's the little chap? Stuart Fell.
Oh, Stuart Fell.
Derek Ware, who plays Big Bin Josh here, was kind of the founder of Havoc, and eventually they proved a bit too expensive. So that big gap between Pertwee's first season, when it had a lot of those kind of pizzazz scenes, and a little later, well, it's still good stuff.
The bit where the Master jumps onto the top of the truck, and then although it's clearly not Delgado as the Master jumping
good enough, isn't it?
But it's definitely Delgado on the top of the truck,
under the tunnel, climbing up on the top,
on the
top,
and then the stunt guy swings down and goes into the cab, or approaches, and then
it's like Tom Cruise in Rogue Nation.
But it's really well cut.
It's really good.
It's a great bit of stunt work, but it's also really well cut because it cuts to the driver inside looking at the mirror, and
he does a double take when he sees the Master, and then he hypnotizes him through the mirror.
Of course, to piece together all the different parts, because obviously it wasn't one seamless action that was being filmed. It's really well done.
It's great direction.
Yeah.
And actually also, while you're talking about the stunt and location work, I made a note of in episode 4 where you've got the unit jeep going down the hill with the 2 Axons, one on the bonnet, one on the back, and they jump out and leave a grenade in it, and that's a brilliant scene, and really well directed.
I was getting worried about where it was rolling to, because it was this ball of flames just rolling down.
They're not messing around. It looks fantastic.
Where did they film the... the Tramp is called...
This is all Pig Bin Josh.
Right.
All of that location stuff... Location stuff was done in Dungeness. Which I think was where Derek Jarman ended up living. So maybe if Gold sprayed people... So if he turned up in his backyard, he might...
Maybe all that stuff, it's so bleak, though, and especially, I mean, I know, obviously...
It was freezing, obviously, with the snow. It was... I did have a quick look at the DVD. All the shingle was frozen together when they were filming.
Oh, my God. Yes. The bit where he rides the bicycle into the pool, or the pond.
His knackers would have been in his armpits after that.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that was all I could think about.
Derek wears knackers in his armpits.
God. He manages to act after doing that. He's still thrailing around and acting.
He might have done that on afterwards. Yes.
But I mean, even like when you've got the bit where John Pertwee and Katie Manning sort of turn up to see Axos for the first time, there's the reaction shot that they give at their faces, and they look fucking freezing. I mean, it's like, her nose has gone blue and you can see like their breath trailing off or something. But it's really effective. I know the obviously the famous line is there's freak localized weather conditions, which explains that weather wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be for continuity when we started filming,
and it had been rained away by the next day.
Yeah. But it looks fantastic, and all the snow and ice and everything, it's great. Like, the location stuff's brilliant.
Should we start with Pig Bin Josh?
He's in that character. He's in that sort of category of
Pertwee stories often have
Pertwee era yokel.
That,
there's like Sam Seeley in Spearhead from Space.
Well, yeah, if you got the top trump cards together, Sam Seeley, Ollis from the Three Doctors, and Pig Bin Josh.
The only thing I was disappointed by was that he didn't see the craft land while drinking something, so that he could look at the bottle, look at the bottle, look at the craft, look at the bottle, and look at the craft. Apart from that, he ticked all the boxes.
There's another James Bond mention.
Yeah.
It's that guy from those 3 or 4 Roger Moore movies, isn't it?
So, John, you found this a little dull.
I guess why I found it a bit... I don't know, because I felt like the setup was so sharp, and then it just sort of...
It plays out.
It plays out, rather... Because, for example, I mean, there's this... I mean, this is catnip to me, because I like a sort of socio-political background, but it begins in the first sort of 5 minutes with the whole Chinn saying, I need to know more about this doctor. He's... first of all, the first thing you see of Chinn is him holding a hilarious document
Top secret.
with font.
Yes.
The font. I just love it then when the doctor walks in and bangs him out the way with the door by accident.
Wearing the most gloriously blue satin lined
Well, like
cape.
you say, that's the Essence de Pertwee, that outfit, isn't it? I mean, it's
the nylon shirt with a zip at the front.
Essence de Pertwee, a scent by Havoc.
From Calvin
But... and Chinn says, I need to know more about this doctor. He's not a British citizen. Who is he and where is he from? And the doctor replies sort of, England for the English. Good heavens, man.
Yes. And then he says, I have a duty to my country, not to the world.
Yeah, not to the wider world.
I love that scene.
And so you think there's going to be this kind of, the kind of thing you get much more with, is it Malcolm
Hulke.
Malcolm Hulke, where that kind of thing's really going to be played out.
Yeah.
Sticking it to the man.
This is written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. And I don't think it's badly written, but that seed is there and it doesn't really play out. It tees up all these things and then doesn't really play them out.
I'm slightly going to split the difference, because I mean, this is Bob Baker and Dave Martin's first script for the show, isn't it? And they're regarded as being, sort of...
They have a bad rep now. I mean, their rep is generally that their scripts had a lot of ideas, but they were all underdeveloped.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Certainly with this one, I know there was the original idea, and Terrence Dicks had to take it through lots and lots of rewrites and notes to get them to this stage. I'm a big fan of that.
See, I think their reputation rests on the fact that they deliver the sort of routine Doctor Who runaround. But I think in terms of where this story is, I mean, I loved this. I think this is terrific. And I find it really interesting to watch this after we've done... Because, I mean, a lot of the other Pertwees we've done are the kind of big, heavy hitters, So you got Dinosaurs, Planet of the Spiders, Silurians especially.
Probably our first 4-part Pertwee.
Which are the big... Not only long, but big kind of socio-political meat on the bones with those. And I'd sort of always reconciled sort of other bits of Pertwee Doctor Who, especially when they go down to the 4-parters, as being sort of not so much in that canon. Now, I don't think this is as nuanced as something like the Silurians, and I think where it uses its socio-political elements, it does so mainly for sort of points of satire, really. I mean, it has a lot of fun with Chinn as the man from the Ministry and his pecking order within the Ministry.
He's always getting put down by his
He's always getting put down by his superiors. But, you know, then that actually does have a driving factor on the plot. You know, Chinn, he knows he's backed into a corner, and therefore a lot of the stuff that catalyses around him taking the Axonite from the Axons is you know, his career ambitions do drive the plot. It's not just a bit of surface detail. But I mean, I think this is, apart from part 3, which I think sort of treads water a bit, I think this is really pacey. I think it's really exciting. That first episode in particular is like fantastically exciting. It's real
covers a lot of ground.
Covers a lot of ground. Yeah. Real rat-a-tat-tat
episode
action.
1 is good. I really thought episode 1 was good, and I think it's perhaps because episode 1 is so tight and meaty and has so much in it that I was a bit disappointed perhaps that it didn't quite play out.
Well, see, this is the thing that I wonder if this is and we've talked about this a few times, the advantage of some of the Pertwee 7-parters that we've seen is that when you get to sort of around episodes 3, 4 and 5, there is suddenly a big second element that comes into play. So like in the Silurians, it's the arrival of the Jeffrey Palmer character, which takes the story of...
Sorry. It sounds like a movement in a symphony or something.
Yes.
The coming of the Queen of Sheba.
More portentous than Jeffrey Palmer turning up halfway through would otherwise be. But, you know, you've got the arrival of the Jeffrey Palmer character, which kind of takes the story in a very different direction, and then suddenly like Act 2 of the story feels very different. Whereas because this is 4 parts, you know, it's necessarily much more tight. It sets up something in the first couple of episodes which has to be resolved at the end. So I think in terms of the sort of impact and heft that it can draw out from the story, you know, it's a lot more primary colours, it's a lot more blockbusterised, it's a lot more kind of Route 1 than those other ones. But I don't think... I'd always previously thought that Series 8 was just suddenly a massive drop-off, at least in terms of sophistication, from Series 7, in terms of what they were trying to do. And actually looking at this, I don't see that at all. I think the ambition that they had from Series 7 of doing kind of, you know, ballsy kind of 5 minutes into the future sci-fi thrillers. You know, all of those concerns about, you know, Britain at the time, you know, the fear of an energy crisis is still punching through really strongly in this. That's what drives everything. And, you know, and the idea that Britain can become energy self-sufficient, you know, as a result of what the Axons are bringing to the table, and then the kind of ministerial kind of backbiting and ambition that kind of drives. It's really smart.
Yeah, I think you do have a point about there being quite a lot going on. I don't think it's I don't think it's a fall off conceptually. I just think that the pacing in this one doesn't really work, and some of the ideas could be more fully developed.
Well, that's the thing. Once all the balls are in the air, basically all they have to do is just wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think maybe you're right that the 6-7-parters have both the space to really develop some of those ideas, but also to do a reboot with a mini story, sort of episodes 3 to 5 or something like that. So yeah, I think that's right. But I agree that I agree with you that it is not a fall off in ambition.
No.
And actually, there are some really nice threads in here. Well, there are some nice threads that the Doctor himself is wearing. But
as always.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. But there are some really nice threads here. Like, for example, the Doctor's... when the Axos craft arrives and Chinn wants to shoot it, which actually, in the end, would have been the best thing to do. Although, I mean, obviously, in many ways, it would have been the best thing to do. And the Doctor...
With hindsight, yeah.
And with hindsight... and the signal comes from the craft, Axos calling Earth, we need your assistance, in that sort of rather beautifully creepy sort of Mr. On style voice.
It's a great voice, the voice of Axos.
Yeah, it's superb.
Really blank.
And the Doctor sort of says very glibly, rather a cry for help, don't you think? As if he's sort of won the argument. And he's gullible, liberal and wrong in those circumstances. And if maybe not, obviously, clearly the gung-ho militarism of Chinn
that bit
is
where,
inappropriate.
That bit where they're arming the warheads and Chinn is looking at the monitors, seeing all the military hardware like swinging into action, and he just grins like a schoolboy, says, "Yes, good, excellent."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And at that point, actually, you realise that it's the Brigadier who has the moral high ground, because the Doctor is this sort of credulous liberal. Chinn is this idiot militaristic weirdo, And it's the Brigadier who utters the line. It's very short, but it's just a precaution, Doctor. And he says we should be cautious. And actually, he's the more level-headed in that
because
situation.
He's the only character in this who doesn't, or the only kind of central player in this who doesn't seem to have an agenda other than simply to resolve the situation as well as possible.
That's completely correct.
I think that's really, because the Doctor, at this point is sort of still looking for opportunities to get the TARDIS working, get away from Earth. And he says at the end, unless if the Time Lords hadn't programmed the TARDIS to bring me back home, I would have gone and I'd have left you all. He ultimately is minded towards saving the world, and he does the right thing, and he double crosses the Master and traps Axos in the time loop. So he is heroic in that sense. But he also personally has a lot to gain from this situation and acts in his own self-interest in the way Chinn does as well.
Yeah, I've written here that there's hubris and narrow advantage, but both from Chinn and the Doctor.
Absolutely.
Exactly what you were saying.
But I think Chinn is one of the all-time great supporting Doctor Who characters.
He's the best
he's
of
brilliant.
those
He looks
not
fantastic as well. Well,
I do remember
not Bill
Filer. There's the classic thing of people growing up reading the Target novelizations, then seeing the video or DVD. I remember
Bill
reading
Filer
someone
sort of like action, like James Bond, effectively.
In the book, someone imagined him being, Sean Connery or James Coburn or something, and then you got this kind of flabby Canadian. He doesn't even stack up well against Richard Franklin.
And when he's got his big shades and his leather driving gloves.
Those shades.
They're huge. It's like he's got cataracts or something.
Caught in a trap. I mean, they're proper like Elvis shades. They're fantastic. And his leather driving gloves. No, he's pretty cool. The scene where the two filers fight is really good. And well done, and I guess they've given them both wigs so that can work. His hair certainly doesn't look entirely natural.
Again, John's notes say it's almost as good as Superman 3 in the Junkyard.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, they don't say that.
Yeah.
But I thought the two filers fighting was two filers fighting. I thought the two filers fighting was great. While we're talking about some of the scenes in that sort of control room thing, I do love a Pertwee science control room set,
like a power complex base. Is a joy to behold.
I did like the Master sending some of the unit soldiers off to do something else while sporting a Bo Selector mask.
That's terrible.
Really
bad.
unconvincing.
But also, it looks bad from the back as well.
It's terrible.
It looks bad from the back, but it's muffled as well. And, it's hindsight, but they could have redubbed his voice so it didn't sound like it was muffled under a mask all the time or something. It was... It's pretty bad.
The Master gets some zinger lines in this, though. Was that bit where he says, is there anything you can do? And the Master says no. And he says, I suppose you could take the normal precautions against a nuclear blast. Sticky tape on the windows, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it was so withering when he says it as well,
Yeah, but, it was brilliant. I know it was actually several years later that the government put out the ludicrous Protect and Survive manuals.
It's amazing that it's on the line, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of...
but just in case any of our listeners aren't aware of these sort of, I think it was the very late 70s or early 1980. It was about 1980. These sort of
brush off any radioactive fallout dust from.
But I mean, that's literally brush off any radio.
Sit under a table.
If your mother's died, put her in a bin liner.
Yeah, that kind of. It was more or less that kind of thing. But this kind of echoes that. Quite some years earlier.
So can we talk about the Master?
I was going to say, while we're on the Master, I was just going to say, it's only his third story, but when he turns up, it's really low key, as if, of course, the Master's going to turn up in this story.
So this was a question I wanted to ask you, Jim, actually, because also, this is our first encounter with the Roger Delgado Master, I believe, that we've seen.
We've done the real classic, the Peter Pratt one.
we've done
Ainley
we've done Ainley, we've done Eric Roberts. Yes. Yeah, this is the first time we've got to Delgado.
We're going to the Master.
Yeah, A-N Master. So season 8, the Master is the villain in every story. Was that an expectation that the audience had? Like, was this promoted as like an arc series or something, or would there have just been a wearying sense of inevitability in the audience as the series dragged on?
Old. I was born the year this came out, but it's a good point to raise, though. I just don't think Doctor Who was publicised that way. However, I do think, and I might be wrong, the cover of the Radio Times that year when Doctor Who came back with Terror of the Autons, I think the cover of Radio Times was Pertwee, Katie Manning, Brigadier, possibly Richard Franklin as Cap Mike Yates, and Delgado as the Master, as if this is the team. Rather like when Torchwood launched or something. So I don't know. I don't think you certainly wasn't like now when you know Matt Lucas is coming back next year for every story or whatever. It was a big chunk of repeat returns for him. But no, it wouldn't have been presented as he's going to be the villain in every single story.
But to be honest,
it's really done this way, isn't it? Like I'm sure you've watched the rest of season 8, haven't you already?
Oh, most of it, I think, in bits and pieces. I've not seen
introduced
all of it.
in Terror of the Autons, Mind of Evil. He's got a proper introduction again, but by this, it's that guy again. Yeah,
but I think
halfway through the episode.
I think, to be honest, like as an arc though, and it's interesting having talked about Key to Time as being Doctor Who's first sort of overt attempt at doing an arc. The idea that they would spend a year sort of trying to get hold of this kind of rogue Time Lord terrorist, essentially, who's on Earth as well, is a really good one. And I also, and this is something that you don't see much of in classic Doctor Who as well, the kind of the international scale of it at the beginning. Like, Joe Grant explicitly has that line, so I hear Washington want the Master dealt with for good, or something, which I haven't seen Mind of Evil recently enough to remember if that was something... the Master as like an international threat was starting to kind of weigh on that. But I thought it was really interesting.
He steals a few nerve gas missiles.
Right, okay. Yeah. But the idea that he's kind of almost like a sort of global Bin Laden figure, of which there's this kind of coordinated international sort of endeavour to try and track him down and eliminate him as a threat. I think it's great.
The Blofeld thing is actually well taken, because even the suit he's wearing...
Oh, he's got the Nehru collar and everything. Yeah. Yes, it's...
Delgado's performance, though, I mean, we're all fans, right?
He's fantastic, yeah.
And as a foil to Pertwee as well, I mean, the two of them, they're both heavyweights and they both commit to it.
The Master is very clearly, I mean, we've said this before, but it finds its greatest expression clearly with Delgado, the sort of Holmes Moriarty thing. It's not a particularly illuminating observation, but... the degree to which there is clearly... there's no doubt that he wants to kill the Doctor, but at the same time, he has this evident affection and sparring. Or almost he can't live with him, can't live without him. Delgado's a strong enough actor to pull that off. And, the scenes with them both in the TARDIS really... they come alive.
Well, because I think he's a very good match for Pertwee, because both of them are actors who... self-evidently have some comedic ability. I mean, Pertwee, obviously more famously a comic actor prior to Doctor Who than Delgado was.
But you're right that Delgado delivers that zinger perfectly.
Yeah. And Delgado always gets a couple of zinger lines in a Doctor Who. Also the bit where he's wrestling with the TARDIS and he says, underweight, overpowered museum piece, you might as well try and fly a second-hand gas stove.
I know.
Mastering to stuff, which is great.
That really was great.
I love that.
They have those on Gallifrey there, presumably.
Yeah. But they're both actors of some... comic pedigree, but both of whom commit to the part they're playing 100%, and there's no nods to the audience, there's no winking, there's no kind of sense of the artificiality of it. And I have to say, I mean, this is something that it just reinforces the fact that now whenever something comes around on the schedule, it's the Pertwee stories that I look forward to the most, more than any other, because
even Hartnell.
The Hartnell ones are possibly the most interesting we've looked at, but I bloody love Pertwee. I think he's my favourite Doctor now. I think almost without question. I think he's amazing in this.
Couple of sort of production points.
Yes.
I did love in episode 3 Chinn's video call with the Minister. That feels very prescient. But I also liked when the decision has been made that in order to make sure that they secure their supply of Axonite, that there should be worldwide distribution. Chinn immediately picks up the phone and appears to have a worldwide distribution of Axonite hotline. Oh, you can do that immediately, can you? Yes, all over the world. Brilliant, very good. It's fantastic. I really liked that.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, exactly.
But to be honest, that's slightly... and that's a convenience of the script. But
no, I'm not dissing it. I thought it was great.
But it is also one thing that I like, where the sort of slightly satirical angle comes out of it, is the way that Chinn is a man who's desperately trying to take control of the situation, but the situation is already under the control of professionals who actually know what they're doing. So there's that bit where he phones to get them to arm the warheads and be ready to stand by, and he's relishing doing his like arm missiles, to give the orders, and he goes, "Oh, you are already? Oh, good, very good." Because they're already like he's such a sort of impotent yet ambitious man that everything is always one stage ahead of him, and he sort of loses control of the situation. The only thing that's disappointing about his character is that we don't ever really see what happens to him in the end, do we? He kind of disappears. We see him getting into a car with the Brigadier and Joe Grant when they're evacuating the power complex. But then when they immediately return to to sit in the blown-out room of the blown-up nuclear power plant just to have a chat with the Doctor, he's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, it's not really clear why they bother going back either, because there's no expectation.
It'd be terribly dangerous.
Well, also there was no expectation that the Doctor would come back, because he dematerialized. So anyway, production. We already mentioned the video call and the Chinn hotline. We're going to have a Chinn hotline at the end of this for anyone who's been affected.
If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this.
But what about the design? Because I described the first thing I wrote was that it was a good intro with the craft arriving, but that it did look like a fleshy penis of a craft.
Yeah.
Now, my wife...
John's penis does look exactly like the Axon.
It does. Craft. My wife, Claire, said once the craft had arrived and was sort of, for budget reasons, parked in the shingle...
Yep. She said the shingle.
She said it looked, and I quote, like a female part with teeth. Mm-hmm. Only she didn't say female part.
Right.
Now,
and then when they go inside, there's the voice of Axos. There's the big cock that hangs from the ceiling with a big bell end.
And when they're going through all the sort of curtains.
Membranes.
When they part the curtains.
So, well, they do part the curtains and wander through. And my wife said, and this is a direct quote, there are vaginas all over the craft.
Yeah.
So
and then the
because I thought the walls looked like cheese on toast quite a lot of the time.
And then the Axons with their packets on display as well.
Yeah. So quite something. But I think it does look pretty good as a sort of organic craft.
Yeah.
What do we think of the not the Axon sort of...
Well, there's the Bolognese monster or the
Bolognese monster or the gold-headed people.
I love the gold people.
Yeah,
I love
me
both.
Too. They're super creepy without those eyes. They've got these big bulbous eyes with no eyes in them.
I'm sure I've said this many times before, but growing up on Doctor Who Weekly, seeing photos of those, it just thought, wow, what was that story? I'd love to see them back again. I think they're a great design.
But also, I love that it's that kind of Beauty and the Beast thing they've got going on. That obviously they're these kind of creepy, but like sort of Greeks bearing gifts, isn't it? But the sort of like very classical style statues that they are, and then they turn into these nutso spaghetti blob monster things, which also I have to say I think look great.
Good enough to be resprayed green and
really
reused
well rendered.
in Seeds of Doom a few years later.
They are really well rendered.
Yeah.
And the way they run around on those fields and things and attack the unit soldiers.
Move, with little rubber bands around their feet so they don't trip up.
And I think it was mentioned earlier that the lead Axon, Bernard Hooley, I think his name is, the way that he performs as if English is something that's just been downloaded into his head and he doesn't quite know. It's great.
And a couple of those little details, like, this is, I presume, one of your food animals.
No, unless you're French.
I apologise, but you see what I mean.
As he makes a toad get bigger and smaller.
As they zoom in on a normal, ordinary-sized toad.
Also, that I know we discussed the location work as well, but this is very classic Pertwee in terms of them finding a beautiful, this is the future sort of, they find this glorious 60, I guess it would have been built in the 60s or very early 70s, this plant with the gangway up and a very, sort of Jerry Anderson-esque sort of plant. Yeah. Except that it's real and it's big and it's huge.
But kind of shot, and that's where the sort of limitations of like the location stuff. All being shot on kind of 16mm film really comes through, that it feels, all the location stuff, but especially all that stuff on the plant feels super kind of gritty and raw, like those amazing scenes of Geoffrey Palmer in the Silurians when he's dying.
Obsessed with Geoffrey Palmer.
So good, but it just feels really raw but kind of, I don't know, it's real.
There's one really amazing effect in the plant as well when the Axon spaghetti monster thing or whatever.
Duvet.
It's when he throws a tentacle at one of the soldiers running away, and the
Yes.
soldier explodes
and disappears.
and
backwards,
it looks properly good now.
Yeah,
it still
that's a
looks
really
great.
good effect.
Really well executed.
Yeah.
Who directed this?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Well, this is Michael Ferguson, and this is his last Doctor Who. He did a few others, including The War Machines, which we were all big fans of.
That
So
figures.
he did that, and also Seeds of Death, which we've not reviewed, but
No.
I've got to say is slow-paced.
Well, I think episode 3
And
is the only one.
Ambassadors of Death from the first part of the season.
Well, episode 3 for me is the only one that drags in this story.
It's always, to be fair, episode 3 in any four-parter is always the tough one to sort of sustain, because that's when you've just got to keep the plate spinning without actually doing anything with them. But no, I would agree. Episode 3 is a bit of a drag. But I think, I don't understand why this doesn't have more of a kind of classic reputation. I think this is, I think it's exciting. I think it's witty. I think it's like brilliantly well realised, brilliantly directed, and a lot more sophisticated than its reputation would suggest.
Shot 39, take 2.
My dear Mr. Chinn, if I could leave, I would. If only to get away from people like you.
Doctor?
Sorry, could please people keep out of my eye line? Dancing about, please, it's terribly difficult. I'm sorry, Mike.
39, take 3.
Okay, well, that's us for another month. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can get in touch with us via a variety of means, should you wish to do so. If you've got any comments on any of these stories or stories we've covered in the past, do send them in. We'd love to hear from you.
Stories yet to come.
Or stories yet to come, yes. If
Keep
you can,
an eye out on Facebook.
Yes, keep an eye out on social media. We'll announce what we're going to be looking at next month in the fullness of time. But yes, you can email us at hello@I'llExplainLater.com. You can find us on Twitter at explainlaterpod, or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/I'llExplainLater. And as always, I know we always beg you for this, but if you've enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review on iTunes. We've got a few up there. It really does help get people listening to the show. Our numbers are steadily growing, which is good because we put a lot of effort into this.
Well, you do, I don't.
No, barely.
I don't put any.
You put more.
I'm phoning this in.
I think the listeners would agree with you, John.
You put the most gusto into it.
Yeah. So until next month, thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Good night.
Goodbye.
Ta-ra.